Do you believe in parallel worlds? What if we told you that time travelers from the year 2786 have already been here, and they brought back shocking proof that infinite versions of our reality exist side by side? If you're thinking this sounds like pure science fiction and that there must be a logical explanation for everything, then we're really curious to hear how you'll explain these 10 documented cases. These aren't just stories. These are real encounters with people who claim they've seen our world from a completely different timeline. They've brought photographs, artifacts, and testimonies that scientists still can't explain to this day. So let's jump straight into the first case. And trust us, this one will make you question everything you thought you knew about reality. In March 2021, a mysterious USB drive was found in a safety deposit box in Geneva, Switzerland, abandoned for over 3 decades. When investigators finally accessed its contents, they discovered something that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The drive contained thousands of pages of detailed documentation about something called the divergence event, dated from the year 2786. But here's what made it truly impossible to ignore. The files described historical events from our timeline with perfect accuracy up until the year 2045. And then everything changed. Wars that never happened in our world, technologies we've never seen, countries that don't exist on our maps. The person who left these files claimed to be a temporal anthropologist from 2786, and according to the documents, they had traveled to our timeline to study what they called Timeline Alpha 7, just one of countless parallel versions of Earth existing simultaneously. The safety deposit box had been rented in 1987 by someone using the name Dr. Alexei Markov. Though no records of this person existed in any Swiss database, the bank only opened the box after decades of unpaid fees, expecting to find jewelry or old documents. Instead, they found a single USB drive wrapped in a note written in 7 different languages, including 2 that linguistic experts couldn't identify. The note simply read, "For the timeline, researchers of Alpha 7, evidence enclosed, do not ignore." Pretty creepy, right? When Swiss authorities handed the drive to cybersecurity experts, they immediately noticed something impossible. The storage device itself was made from materials that shouldn't exist yet. The data density was hundreds of times greater than anything our current technology can produce. One expert described it as like finding a smartphone in a medieval tomb. But that was just the beginning. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. The files contained detailed historical records describing our world with perfect accuracy. Major events, political leaders, scientific discoveries, everything matched our timeline exactly up until the year 2045. But then the records diverged into something completely foreign. According to these documents, in 2047, a massive solar event triggered what they called the Great Shift, fundamentally altering human civilization. In this parallel timeline, nations collapsed and reformed into completely new geopolitical entities. The files described countries with names like the Pacific Collective and the Euro-Asian Federation, governing structures that don't exist in our world. But the truly disturbing part came from the detailed descriptions of technology. The files mentioned quantum consciousness networks that allowed people to share thoughts directly, probability engines that could calculate multiple futures simultaneously, and dimensional anchors that kept parallel timelines from bleeding into each other. These weren't vague science fiction concepts. They were described with engineering specifications, mathematical formulas, and detailed diagrams that physicists examined with growing unease. The author of these files, who identified themselves only as Observer 7 Mark 339, claimed to be part of a temporal research initiative launched in the year 2786. Their mission was to document parallel timelines and study how small changes in history create vastly different realities. According to the documentation, they had visited our timeline multiple times between 2020 and 2025, carefully observing without interference. The files even included photographs, images showing locations in Geneva that looked almost right but with subtle differences, buildings in slightly different positions, streets with different names, even the sky having a different tint. Skeptics immediately called it an elaborate hoax, and honestly, who could blame them? But here's what they couldn't explain. The USB drive's technology was decades ahead of its time. impossible to fake with 1,980 seconds equipment. The mathematical formulas in the documents were so advanced that quantum physicists admitted they couldn't fully understand them, yet they appeared internally consistent. And perhaps most unsettling, several predictions in the files for events between 2021 and 2024 actually came true, with disturbing accuracy. Some researchers believe the files are genuine evidence that our timeline is just one of countless parallel worlds existing simultaneously. Others think it's a message from the future warning us about a divergence point that hasn't happened yet. And a few believe the author of these files might still be here, observing us right now, waiting to see how our timeline unfolds. So, what do you think? Could these files truly be evidence from a parallel Earth? Is someone from the year 2786 really watching our timeline, documenting our every move? And if our world is scheduled to diverge in 2045, what exactly is coming that will split our reality into something unrecognizable? A thought that is absolutely fascinating and deeply terrifying at the same time. On a quiet morning in July 2019, a woman walked into a police station in Bristol, England, in a state of complete panic. She gave her name as Sarah Jennings, showed her driver's license, and then said something that made every officer in the room freeze. "I don't belong in this world," she whispered. "In my reality, the Soviet Union never fell. Princess Diana is still alive. And I have a different family." What made this case absolutely extraordinary wasn't just her claim, but what investigators discovered when they looked into her background. Sarah Jennings did exist in our timeline, with the same face, same fingerprints, same DNA, but according to her memories, her entire life had unfolded completely differently. She described a childhood in a house that was torn down in our timeline before she was born. She named friends and family members who, in our world, never existed. And then she mentioned something that made even skeptics pay attention. She claimed a time traveler from 2786 had accidentally brought her through a dimensional rift while conducting an experiment. The officers initially thought they were dealing with a mental health crisis, but Sarah wasn't incoherent or delusional. She was calm, articulate, and disturbingly specific. She sat in the interview room and methodically described a world that was almost identical to ours, but with crucial differences. Imagine for a moment being so certain about your own life, your own memories, only to wake up one day and find that none of it matches reality. That's exactly what happened to Sarah. She described growing up in a house at 47 Redland Road in Bristol, a property that records showed had been demolished in 1985, 2 years before she was born in our timeline. She named her childhood best friend, Emma Cartwright, and provided detailed memories of their time together. But when investigators searched, no Emma Cartwright matching that description existed anywhere in the UK. Sarah even described her parents' professions differently. In her memories, her father worked as an engineer for a Soviet technology firm that had offices in Britain, a company that never existed in our world because the Soviet Union had collapsed in 1991. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Sarah began describing historical events from her reality, and some of them were documented with eerie precision. She claimed that in her world, Princess Diana had survived the 1997 car crash and went on to become a prominent humanitarian figure, leading a major climate initiative in the 2010 seconds. She described political leaders who never existed, wars that never happened, and technologies that seemed slightly more advanced than ours. One particularly unsettling detail, she mentioned that, in her timeline, a global pandemic had occurred in 2003, not 2020, fundamentally changing how society operated. Now here's where the case takes a turn into the truly unexplainable. Sarah described the exact moment her world changed. On July 12, 2019, she was walking through Bristol's Clifton Suspension Bridge when she noticed a man watching her intently. He approached and said something that froze her blood cold. "You need to come with me right now. There's been a timeline breach." Before she could respond, he grabbed her arm and she felt a sensation like being pulled through water. Everything around her shimmered, rippled like a reflection in a pond. When the sensation stopped, she was standing in the same spot, but something felt fundamentally wrong. The bridge looked slightly different. The sky seemed a different shade of blue. And when she went home, her apartment was occupied by complete strangers who had never heard of her. The man, who claimed to be from the year 2786, explained that his temporal scanning equipment had malfunctioned, accidentally pulling her consciousness across dimensional barriers into our parallel timeline. He tried to reverse it, but something went wrong. Sarah was now trapped in a world that looked like hers, but wasn't. He vanished before she could ask more questions, leaving her completely alone in an alien reality. Psychologists examined Sarah extensively. She showed no signs of psychosis, no indicators of false memory syndrome, no evidence of elaborate lying. DNA tests confirmed she was biologically the daughter of her parents in our timeline, yet she insisted they weren't the parents she remembered. Brain scans revealed something peculiar, unusual patterns of neural activity that neurologists couldn't fully explain, almost as if her brain was processing memories that shouldn't exist. Some experts believe Sarah experienced a rare psychological condition where the brain creates elaborate false memories. Others think she might be suffering from an undiagnosed disorder. But what they can't explain is her knowledge of specific details that she shouldn't know, historical facts about Bristol's urban development that weren't common knowledge, names of demolished buildings, dates of events that require deep archival research to verify. So, what really happened to Sarah Jennings? Did she truly slip through a crack between parallel worlds? Is she living proof that infinite versions of our reality exist side by side, separated by barriers so thin that sometimes they break? And if a time traveler from 2786 really did pull her into our timeline by accident, how many others might be trapped in the wrong world right now, desperately trying to convince people that they don't belong here? Extremely creepy when you think about it. In 2017, an anonymous package arrived at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, addressed to the Quantum Physics Department. Inside were 7 photographs and a handwritten note that simply read, "From Timeline Epsilon 1-2, proof requested, year 2786. At first, the professors thought it was an elaborate prank, but when they examined the photographs closely, they realized something was terribly wrong. The images showed familiar landmarks, the Statue of Liberty, the Eiffel Tower, the Great Wall of China, but with disturbing differences. The Statue of Liberty held a sword instead of a torch. The Eiffel Tower had a completely different architectural design, and the Great Wall stretched in directions that made no geographical sense. Forensic analysis revealed the photographs weren't digitally manipulated. The paper they were printed on contained materials that wouldn't be invented for decades. And strangest of all, background details in each photo showed technology that doesn't exist in our world. Flying vehicles, holographic advertisements, and buildings with impossible architecture. The sender claimed these were everyday scenes from a parallel Earth, and that in the year 2786, travel between these realities had become possible. The package arrived on October 3, 2017, delivered by Standard Postal Service with no return address. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a leading quantum physicist at MIT, was the first to open it. She initially laughed when she read the note, assuming it was from a student with too much time on their hands. But when she looked at the photographs, her smile disappeared. These weren't normal, she later told colleagues. Something about them felt fundamentally wrong. Think about this for a moment. Imagine looking at a photograph of the Statue of Liberty, one of the most iconic landmarks in the world, and seeing it holding a massive sword pointed toward the sky instead of her famous torch. That's exactly what the first photograph showed. The statue stood in the same location, on Liberty Island in New York Harbor, but the symbolism was completely different. Instead of representing enlightenment and freedom through knowledge, this version represented something else entirely. Power, defense. Absolutely no one could say for certain, but that was just the beginning. The second photograph showed the Eiffel Tower, except it wasn't the delicate lattice structure we all know. This version was bulkier, more industrial, with massive supporting columns, and what appeared to be observation decks at multiple levels that don't exist on our Eiffel Tower. Background details showed the Parisian skyline, but with buildings that seemed more advanced, taller, built with materials that looked almost crystalline. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. The third photograph depicted the Great Wall of China, but the wall extended in completely impossible directions. In our world, the Great Wall runs generally east to west, across northern China. In this photograph, the wall curved in strange patterns, almost like it was designed to protect against threats from multiple directions simultaneously. And in the distance, you could see what appeared to be energy barriers shimmering above sections of the wall, as if the ancient structure had been retrofitted with futuristic technology. The remaining 4 photographs were even more disturbing. One showed Tokyo with massive floating platforms hovering above the city, connected by transparent tubes through which you could see vehicles moving. Another depicted London, but the Thames River appeared to be covered by a massive dome structure, creating an enclosed environment beneath. The 6th photo showed Moscow's Red Square, with holographic projections displaying what looked like 3-dimensional news broadcasts in mid-air. And the final photograph captured what appeared to be the Grand Canyon, except enormous cities were built directly into the canyon walls, with bridges spanning the massive gorge at multiple levels. When MIT's forensics lab analyzed the photographs, they discovered something that sent chills through everyone involved. The photographic paper contained microscopic fibers made from a polymer compound that doesn't exist in current manufacturing. Chemical analysis revealed materials consistent with paper, but with additional components that researchers couldn't identify. One material science expert described it as like analyzing paper from 50 years in the future. The photographs themselves showed no signs of digital manipulation whatsoever. No evidence of Photoshop, no pixel inconsistencies, no layering artifacts. If these were fakes, they were created using techniques that surpassed any known technology. Skeptics argued that someone with advanced knowledge of materials, science, and photography had created an elaborate hoax, but they couldn't explain how the paper was made, or why someone would go to such extreme lengths for a prank that brought no obvious benefit. Others suggested the photographs might be concept art for a film or video game, but no production company ever claimed them. Some researchers at MIT began to take the photographs seriously. They studied the architectural details, the technological elements, the subtle differences in how these parallel landmarks were designed. One physicist noted that many of the modifications seemed to serve practical purposes, as if history had unfolded differently and societies had solved problems in alternative ways. The sword-wielding Statue of Liberty might represent a world where America took a more militaristic path. The enclosed Thames might indicate a timeline where climate change or pollution forced radical environmental adaptations. So what do you think? Are these photographs really evidence from a parallel Earth? Could someone from the year 2786 truly have visited an alternate timeline, captured these images, and sent them to our world as proof? And if timeline Epsilon 1-2 really exists, how many other parallel versions of Earth are out there right now? Each with their own versions of history, their own landmarks, their own reality, pretty fascinating and deeply unsettling at the same time. This case is so unsettling that it still gives researchers sleepless nights. In October 2020, a 3-4-year-old software engineer named Marcus Webb woke up in a hospital in Seattle after a severe car accident. When doctors asked him routine questions, his answers didn't make sense. He insisted he had died in that accident. Not almost died. Actually died. He described the entire experience, the moment of impact, his final thoughts, everything going dark. But then something impossible happened. He woke up in what he initially thought was the afterlife, only to realize he was in a slightly different version of Seattle. His apartment was in a different building. His job didn't exist. His girlfriend had never heard of him. After weeks of desperate confusion, a stranger approached him on the street and said, "You've crossed over, haven't you?" The stranger claimed to be from the year 2786 and explained that Marcus had accidentally slipped through a quantum fracture between parallel timelines at the moment of his death. In his original world, Marcus had died. In this world, this timeline, a different version of Marcus was supposed to exist. But somehow, his consciousness had replaced that version, and now he was trapped in a reality that was almost, but not quite, his own. The accident happened on October 17th, 2020, on Interstate 5 during evening rush hour. Marcus's car was struck by a semi-truck that ran a red light. According to the police report, it should have been fatal. The impact crushed the driver's side completely. Emergency responders were shocked to find him alive at all. But Marcus remembers it differently. He remembers the moment of impact with perfect clarity, the sound of metal tearing, the sensation of his body being crushed, and then darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. He was certain he had died. Imagine waking up after experiencing what you absolutely know was your own death. That's exactly what Marcus faced. When he opened his eyes in the hospital 3 days later, doctors told him he was lucky to be alive. But something felt wrong immediately. The hospital room looked slightly different from what he expected. The equipment was in the wrong places. Even the view from the window seemed off. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. When Marcus was finally discharged and returned to his apartment in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood he'd lived in for 6 years, he couldn't find his building. The address existed, but a completely different structure stood there. He pulled out his keys, but they didn't match any of the locks. Confused and terrified, he called his girlfriend, Emma. But when a woman answered his call, she had no idea who he was. She insisted her name was Emma Rodriguez, but she'd never met anyone named Marcus Webb. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks in a state of complete panic. His employer, a tech startup called Nexus Solutions, didn't exist. The building where his office should have been housed, a different company entirely. His bank accounts were gone. His social media profiles had vanished. According to every official record, Marcus Webb existed, but his entire life history was different. Documents showed he'd grown up in Portland, not Chicago. He'd attended different schools, worked different jobs, lived in different cities. It was as if someone had taken his identity and rewritten his entire past. But then something happened that changed everything. On November 3rd, 2020, while Marcus sat alone in a coffee shop trying to process his impossible situation, a man in his 40s approached him. The stranger sat down without asking and said those chilling words. "You've crossed over, haven't you? You remember dying." Marcus froze. How could this stranger possibly know? The man introduced himself only as Observer 447 and claimed to be part of a temporal monitoring team from the year 2786. He explained that at the exact moment of Marcus's death, something extraordinarily rare had occurred. A quantum fracture, a microscopic tear in the fabric of reality between parallel timelines. Marcus's consciousness, at the instant of death, had slipped through this fracture and merged with a version of himself in a parallel world. But here's the truly disturbing part. In this timeline, the Marcus Webb, who was supposed to exist, had somehow been displaced. His consciousness had simply ceased to exist the moment our Marcus arrived. Observer 447 explained that this phenomenon, called quantum consciousness transfer, was well documented in 2786, but extremely rare in the 21st century. It typically only occurred during moments of severe trauma, when consciousness existed in a quantum state between life and death. The stranger showed Marcus a device that displayed what he called timeline resonance signatures, proving that Marcus's consciousness didn't match this reality's quantum frequency. Psychologists who later examined Marcus believed he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder combined with dissociative amnesia. They argued his brain had created elaborate false memories to cope with the trauma of the accident. But they couldn't explain his incredibly specific knowledge of places and people that didn't exist. Details he described with perfect clarity that would require extensive research to fabricate. Some quantum physicists find Marcus's story strangely plausible. Theories about quantum consciousness and the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggest that every decision, every event, creates branching timelines. What if consciousness really can slip between these branches under extreme conditions? So, what really happened to Marcus Webb? Did he truly die in one reality and wake up in another? Is he living proof that our consciousness can transcend the boundaries between parallel worlds? And if it happened to him, how many others have experienced quantum consciousness transfer without realizing it? How many people around you right now might be living in the wrong timeline, forever searching for a world they can never return to? Extremely creepy when you really think about it. During a routine archaeological dig in 2018, near Berlin, Germany, construction workers unearthed something that should not exist. It was a military medal, beautifully preserved, engraved with a date, 1952. But the inscription described a war that never happened in our timeline, the European Coalition War, a conflict involving nations and alliances completely foreign to our history books. When researchers examined the metal, they discovered the metal alloy was decades ahead of 1952's technology. Even more puzzling, the metal bore the seal of something called the Temporal Preservation Society Est. 2786. Inside a small compartment hidden in the metal's design, they found a microscopic data chip, technology that wouldn't exist for years. When finally accessed, the chip contained a message. To whoever finds this, you are living in timeline beta 3. This metal comes from timeline Gamma 9, where history took a different path. We leave these artifacts as proof. The walls between worlds are thinner than you think. The message was signed by someone claiming to be a temporal archaeologist from the year 2786, and they left coordinates that, when investigated, revealed 6 more impossible artifacts buried across Europe. The discovery happened on June 22, 2018, in the Mitte district of Berlin during construction for a new subway extension. Worker Klaus Hoffmann was operating an excavator when his machine struck something metallic about 3 meters below street level. When he climbed down to investigate, he found the metal wrapped in a preservation cloth that showed no signs of decay, despite being buried for decades. The metal itself was stunning, ornate, with detailed engravings that seemed too precise for 1,950 seconds manufacturing techniques. Think about this for a moment. Imagine finding a medal commemorating a war that never happened, describing battles that were never fought, honoring soldiers from nations that never existed. That's exactly what German historians faced when they examined the inscription. It read, "For valor in the European Coalition War, 1951 to 1952. Awarded to Major Heinrich Steiner, 3rd Division, Anglo-Prussian Alliance." But absolutely no Anglo-Prussian alliance existed in 1952. Prussia had ceased to exist as a nation decades earlier, and Britain and Germany had been bitter enemies during World War II, not allies. When metallurgists analyzed the metal's composition, they discovered something that made absolutely no sense. The alloy contained a combination of metals that wouldn't be developed until the late 1990 seconds, including trace amounts of rare earth elements processed using techniques that didn't exist in the 1950 seconds. One materials scientist described it as finding a smartphone circuit board in a Roman tomb. Absolutely impossible. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. Under high-powered microscopes, researchers discovered the hidden compartment, a tiny space carved into the metal's thick base with precision that required laser technology. Inside was a data chip smaller than a grain of rice, containing information that, when finally decoded, sent chills through everyone involved. The message described a parallel timeline where World War II had ended differently, leading to new alliances, new conflicts, and ultimately a devastating war in the early 1950 seconds that reshaped Europe completely. But the truly mind-blowing part was what came next. The message included GPS coordinates for 6 additional burial sites across Europe. Skeptical researchers decided to investigate, expecting to find nothing. On September 14, 2018, an international team excavated the first coordinates near Prague, Czech Republic. They found a military compass dated 1951, made from the same impossible alloy, bearing the same seal from the Temporal Preservation Society. The second site in Lyon, France, yielded a soldier's identification tag from something called the Mediterranean Defense League. The third site near Warsaw, Poland, contained a fragment of a uniform made from synthetic fibers that wouldn't be invented for another 30 years. Each artifact told pieces of a story from a world that never existed in our timeline, a world where history had taken a dramatically different path. By the time all 6 additional sites were excavated, researchers had recovered military documents, personal letters, photographs showing cities that looked almost right but with crucial differences, and technology that shouldn't exist. One photograph showed Berlin, but the city's architecture was different, with buildings that were never constructed in our reality. Skeptics immediately called it an elaborate hoax, possibly the most sophisticated historical forgery ever attempted. But they struggled to explain how someone could have created artifacts using materials and technology from the future, buried them at precise depths that matched their supposed age, and scattered them across 6 different countries. The cost and effort required would be astronomical. For what purpose? No one claimed credit. No one benefited financially. Some historians believe the artifacts are genuine evidence from a parallel Earth. Others think they might be deliberate plants from time travelers trying to prove parallel timelines exist. A few researchers even suggest the Temporal Preservation Society from 2786 might be conducting a long-term study, leaving artifacts throughout history to see how different timelines react to proof of other realities. One detail stands out as particularly unsettling. Each artifact was found exactly where the coordinates said it would be, buried at depths that soil analysis confirmed matched the supposed age. If this is a hoax, the perpetrators would have needed to plant these artifacts decades ago, long before GPS technology even existed to provide such precise coordinates. So what do you think? Are these artifacts really proof that parallel timelines exist? Could someone from the year 2786 truly be leaving evidence throughout our world? Breadcrumbs showing us that our reality is just one of countless alternatives? And if Timeline Gamma 9 really exists, where the European Coalition War actually happened, how many other parallel Earths are out there right now, each with their own version of history? Pretty fascinating and absolutely terrifying at the same time. Every parent's worst nightmare came true for the Morrison family in 2016, when their 8-year-old son, Daniel, vanished during a camping trip in Yosemite National Park. Search teams combed the area for weeks, but found nothing. Then, exactly 11 months later, Daniel walked out of the same forest, looking confused but physically unharmed. The reunion should have been joyful, but something was terribly wrong. Daniel remembered his family, but his memories didn't match theirs. He talked about a sister he never had. He described their house completely differently. He mentioned family vacations to places they'd never been. Child psychologists initially suspected trauma-induced false memories, but then Daniel said something that changed everything. He claimed that while lost in the forest, a woman appeared who said she was from the year 2786. She told him she could take him home, and he followed her through what looked like a doorway of light. When he stepped through, he found himself back at the campsite, but everything felt slightly different. The doctors who examined him found something extraordinary. His DNA matched his parents perfectly, confirming he was their biological son. But brain scans revealed neural patterns that doctors had never seen before, as if his consciousness had been fundamentally altered. Had Daniel actually returned from a parallel version of his own life? Daniel Morrison disappeared on July 8, 2016, during a family camping trip to the Tuolumne Meadows area of Yosemite. His parents, Jennifer and Robert Morrison, had taken him and their camping gear to a popular trail. Daniel had walked just 20 feet ahead of them on the path when they briefly looked down to check their map. When they looked up, he was gone. Absolutely no trace, no sounds of struggle, no footprints leading off the trail, nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Search and rescue teams spent weeks searching the area. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew over the forest. Trained search dogs followed every possible trail. Volunteers combed through dense wilderness, covering a radius of 10 miles. But they found absolutely nothing. No clothing, no signs of where Daniel could have gone, not a single clue. After 30 days, the search was officially scaled back, and the Morrison family faced the heartbreaking reality that their son might never come home. Imagine the agony of those 11 months. The Morrisons held candlelight vigils, distributed missing person flyers, and never stopped hoping. Then, on June 9, 2017, something impossible happened. A ranger spotted a young boy walking along the same trail where Daniel had disappeared, looking disoriented but unharmed. It was Daniel. Same clothes he'd been wearing 11 months earlier, barely dirty, showing no signs of prolonged exposure or starvation. He looked exactly as he had the day he vanished. The reunion was captured on video, and you can see the moment Jennifer Morrison realized it was her son. Pure joy, tears, overwhelming relief. But within hours, that joy turned to confusion and then to fear. Daniel kept saying things that didn't make sense. He asked about his sister Emily, insisting she must be worried about him. But the Morrisons don't have a daughter. They never had. Daniel described their house in Sacramento as having a pool in the backyard, but their house has never had a pool. He mentioned a family trip to Disneyland for his 7th birthday, but that trip never happened. His 7th birthday had been celebrated at home with close relatives. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. Child psychologists examined Daniel extensively, suspecting the trauma of being lost had caused him to create false memories as a coping mechanism. But Daniel's memories weren't random or vague. They were incredibly specific and consistent. He described his sister Emily in perfect detail. Her age, her appearance, her favorite toys, her personality. He drew pictures of their house with the pool, showing architectural details a child his age couldn't fabricate. He even remembered specific conversations with family members about events that never occurred in this timeline. When doctors performed medical tests, They confirmed his identity beyond any doubt. DNA tests matched his parents perfectly. His fingerprints matched records from his birth. But then, neurologists performed advanced brain scans and discovered something that froze their blood cold. Daniel's neural pathways showed patterns that shouldn't exist in an 8-year-old brain. Certain regions associated with memory and consciousness displayed activity levels typically seen in adults who had undergone significant neurological events. One neurologist described it as looking at a brain that had been rewired by something we don't understand. Daniel remained consistent in his account of what happened. He said he'd been walking along the trail when he got confused and wandered off. As darkness fell and fear set in, a woman appeared. She looked kind and told him not to be afraid. She said, "I'm from very far in the future, from the year 2786. I can help you get home." She showed him what looked like a doorway made of shimmering light standing in the middle of the forest. Daniel, desperate and scared, followed her through it. He described feeling like he was falling through water, everything around him rippling and shifting. Then, suddenly, he was back at the campsite, but something felt wrong. The forest seemed slightly different. The light looked strange. And when he finally found his family, they seemed different too. Skeptics argue that Daniel experienced severe psychological trauma, and his mind created an elaborate fantasy to explain his ordeal. They suggest he may have been found and cared for by someone who later returned him to the forest, and his memories became confused. But this theory doesn't explain the brain scan abnormalities, his impossible knowledge of specific details, or why his clothing showed minimal wear after 11 months. Some researchers believe Daniel's story might actually be true. What if the woman from 2786 really did find him and try to help? What if she opened a portal intending to send him home, but accidentally sent him to a parallel version of his own timeline? In this reality, the Morrisons never had a daughter named Emily. Their house never had a pool. That Disneyland trip never happened. But in Daniel's original timeline, all of those things were real. So what really happened to Daniel Morrison? Did he truly slip through a crack between parallel worlds? Is he a boy living in the wrong version of his own life, forever remembering a sister who doesn't exist and a home he can never return to? And if it happened to him, how many other missing children might have accidentally crossed into parallel timelines, trapped in realities that are almost right but forever wrong? Extremely creepy when you think about it. In the world of quantum physics, there's a thought experiment called quantum suicide, a disturbing theory suggesting that consciousness might continue in parallel timelines even after death in one timeline. In 2019, a physicist named Dr. Elena Vasquez claimed she had accidentally proven this theory, and her story is absolutely terrifying. During a laboratory experiment with quantum entanglement at CERN, something went catastrophically wrong. Dr. Vasquez was exposed to a massive energy discharge that should have killed her instantly. Colleagues watched in horror as she collapsed. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. But here's where it gets impossible to explain. 6 hours later, Dr. Vasquez walked back into the laboratory, alive and conscious, claiming she had no memory of dying. Security footage showed her body being removed in a body bag. Yet here she was, physically present, insisting she had never left. When investigators questioned her, she revealed something that made their blood run cold. She remembered the accident differently. In her memory, the experiment had succeeded, and she had walked away unharmed. But then she started noticing tiny differences. A colleague's wedding ring on the wrong hand, a laboratory door that opened the wrong way, her own apartment in a different building. A stranger later contacted her, claiming to be from 2786, and explained what had happened. At the moment of the accident, her consciousness had quantum tunneled into a parallel timeline where she survived. She had literally died in one world and continued living in another. The experiment took place on November 14, 2019, at CERN's Quantum Research Facility in Geneva, Switzerland. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a 41-year-old particle physicist specializing in quantum entanglement, was leading a team testing a new theory about consciousness and quantum states. The experiment involved exposing quantum particles to specific energy frequencies while monitoring their behavior. It was routine work, something the team had done dozens of times before. But on that day, something went terribly wrong. At exactly 2:47 p.m., according to laboratory logs, there was a massive power surge. Equipment malfunctioned. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Vasquez, who was standing closest to the quantum chamber, was struck by an electrical discharge so powerful that it threw her across the room. Her colleagues, Dr. Marcus Chen and Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, rushed to her side. They found her unconscious, not breathing, with no detectable pulse. Dr. Chen, who had medical training, immediately began CPR while Dr. Okonkwo called for emergency services. Think about this for a moment. Imagine being declared dead, your body removed from the scene, and then walking back into that same room hours later, as if nothing had happened. That's exactly what Dr. Vasquez experienced. Except from her perspective, absolutely nothing had gone wrong. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and confirmed what her colleagues already knew. Dr. Elena Vasquez was dead. They documented the time of death as 3:04 p.m. Security footage, which was later reviewed extensively, shows paramedics placing her body in a bag and removing it from the laboratory. Multiple witnesses saw this happen. There was no doubt that Dr. Vasquez had died. But then, at 9:12 p.m. that same evening, she walked through the laboratory doors, very much alive, looking confused about why everyone was staring at her in shock. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. Dr. Vasquez had no memory of dying. According to her recollection, the experiment had proceeded normally. There had been no power surge, no electrical discharge, no accident at all. She remembered finishing her work, leaving the laboratory around 6 p.m., going home to her apartment, and then returning that evening because she'd forgotten some files. When confronted with the security footage showing her body being removed, she watched in silent horror. She saw herself lying motionless on the floor. She watched as paramedics worked on her lifeless body, but she had absolutely no memory of any of it happening. The confusion deepened when Dr. Vasquez began noticing small discrepancies. Her colleague Dr. Chen wore his wedding ring on his right hand, but she distinctly remembered it always being on his left hand. The door to Laboratory 7 opened outward, but she swore it had always opened inward. When she returned to her apartment that night, the building looked slightly different. Same address, but the exterior was painted a different color. Her apartment number was the same, but the layout felt subtly wrong. Over the following days, Dr. Vasquez documented dozens of tiny differences. Street signs in slightly different positions, colleagues mentioning events she had no memory of, references to scientific papers she'd supposedly read but had never seen before. Each discrepancy was minor on its own, but collectively they painted a disturbing picture. This wasn't quite her world. 3 weeks after the incident, on December 5th, 2019, Dr. Vasquez was approached outside CERN by a woman who introduced herself only as Temporal Observer 891. The woman claimed to be from the year 2786 and part of a team monitoring quantum events across power timelines. She explained that the energy surge had created what she called a quantum bifurcation event. In one timeline, Dr. Vasquez had died from the electrical discharge. But in that exact moment, her consciousness had quantum tunneled into a parallel timeline where the accident played out differently, where she survived. The woman showed Dr. Vasquez data on a device that displayed what she called consciousness resonance patterns, proving that her quantum signature didn't match this timeline's normal frequency. Skeptics argue that Dr. Vasquez experienced severe psychological trauma and created false memories to cope with a near-death experience. They suggest she may have been in a coma, not actually dead, and the security footage has been misinterpreted. But this explanation falls apart under scrutiny. Multiple medical professionals pronounced her dead. The footage clearly shows a body being removed. And how do you explain her detailed knowledge of a completely different version of events? Some quantum physicists find her account disturbingly plausible. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every quantum event creates branching timelines. What if consciousness really can shift between these branches under extreme conditions? What if death in one timeline doesn't mean the end of consciousness, just a quantum leap to a reality where you survived? So, what really happened to Dr. Elena Vasquez? Did she truly die and wake up in a parallel world? Is consciousness itself a quantum phenomenon that can tunnel between realities? And if this is possible, how many of us have already died in other timelines, continuing to exist in alternate versions where we made it through? How many times have you narrowly avoided an accident And what if in another timeline, you didn't avoid it, but your consciousness simply shifted here without you ever knowing? Absolutely terrifying when you think about it. There's a small town in Norway called Hessdalen that has experienced something absolutely extraordinary for decades. Unexplained lights in the sky that appear multiple times per year, documented by scientists and researchers since the 1,980 seconds. But in 2018, something happened that transformed this scientific curiosity into one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for parallel worlds. Multiple residents reported that during one particular light phenomenon, the entire town seemed to flicker between two different realities. Buildings that didn't exist suddenly appeared. Roads changed direction. The sky itself looked different, a strange purple hue that no one had ever seen before. The episode lasted only 17 seconds, but during that time, residents took photographs and videos. When analyzed, the footage showed something impossible. The town existed in two completely different states simultaneously, structures overlapping, roads occupying the same space but leading to different places. Even the people in the photographs appeared different, wearing unfamiliar clothes, looking around in equal confusion. One photograph captured something particularly disturbing, a sign in the town square, but the language wasn't Norwegian. It wasn't any known language. Later investigation revealed that, during those 17 seconds, Hessdalen had somehow become visible to observers in a parallel timeline, and vice versa. Some researchers believe a temporal observation team from 2786 had been studying the phenomenon when their equipment caused a temporary overlap between worlds. For 17 seconds, two versions of the same town occupied the same space, and the photographs prove it. Hessdalen is a small valley community in central Norway with a population of just under 150 people. Since the early 1980 seconds, the area has been famous in scientific circles for the Hessdalen lights, mysterious illuminated objects that appear in the sky with no clear explanation. Universities have established permanent monitoring stations there. Cameras run continuously. Scientists from around the world have studied the phenomenon for decades, documenting hundreds of sightings. But absolutely no one expected what would happen on August 9, 2018. That evening started like many others in Hessdalen. Around 8:30 p.m., as twilight settled over the valley, the lights appeared. Bright, pulsating orbs hovering in the sky, a sight locals had grown accustomed to over the years. Resident Lars Johansson was filming the lights on his phone, something he'd done dozens of times before. But then, something changed. The lights began to intensify, growing brighter and brighter until they became almost blinding. Think about this for a moment. Imagine standing in your own town, looking at familiar streets and buildings you've known your entire life, when suddenly everything around you starts to flicker like a bad television signal. That's exactly what happened to the residents of Hessdalen that night. At exactly 8:47 p.m., according to multiple synchronized timestamps on phones and cameras, the flickering began. For 17 seconds, Hessdalen existed in two states simultaneously. Lars's video footage shows it clearly. Buildings that don't exist in our timeline suddenly appeared, overlapping with the structures that should be there. A large warehouse-like structure materialized in the town square, occupying the same space as the community center but looking completely different, made of materials that seemed almost metallic. Roads shifted, creating impossible intersections where pathways from two different versions of Hessdalen tried to occupy the same physical space. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. The sky itself changed. Multiple photographs captured the same phenomenon, a strange purple-tinted atmosphere completely unlike Norway's normal sky. The lighting was wrong, as if the sun was setting from a different angle, and in the background of several images, you can see mountains that don't exist in our version of Hessdalen's geography. But perhaps the most disturbing element appeared in photographs taken by resident Ingrid Solberg. Her camera captured people, dozens of them, walking through the town square. Except they weren't the residents of Hessdalen. They were strangers, wearing unfamiliar clothing, styles that looked almost futuristic, yet somehow practical. And these people appeared to be photographing and videoing the residents of our Hessdalen with equal confusion and amazement. For 17 seconds, two groups of people from parallel timelines were looking at each other, both equally shocked by what they were seeing. The town square sign that Ingrid photographed remains one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence. In our timeline, the sign reads, Hessdalen Centrum, in Norwegian. But in the photograph, the sign displays text in a completely unknown writing system. Linguistic experts from universities across Europe have examined it extensively. The characters don't match any known language, living or dead. Some linguists suggest it might be an evolved form of Norwegian from an alternate timeline's future, while others believe it could be an entirely different linguistic evolution that never happened in our world. When the 17 seconds ended, everything snapped back to normal. The overlapping buildings vanished. The sky returned to its familiar color. The strange people disappeared. Residents stood in shocked silence, many of them still holding phones and cameras that had captured the impossible event. Skeptics immediately claimed it was a mass hallucination triggered by atmospheric conditions and the mysterious lights. They argued that electromagnetic phenomena could have caused everyone's phones and cameras to malfunction simultaneously, creating corrupted images that looked like overlapping realities. But this theory falls apart when you examine the evidence. Over 40 independent devices captured nearly identical footage from different angles. The timestamps match perfectly, and hallucinations don't leave photographic evidence. Some quantum physicists propose a more extraordinary explanation. What if parallel timelines normally exist separately, but under specific conditions, the barriers between them can become temporarily transparent? The Hessdalen lights might be a side effect of natural quantum fluctuations in that particular location, thinning the walls between realities. And on August 9th, 2018, those walls became so thin that two versions of Hessdalen briefly overlapped. The most intriguing theory comes from researchers who believe the event wasn't natural at all. 3 weeks after the incident, several residents reported being approached by individuals claiming to be temporal observers from the year 2786. These observers allegedly explained that they had been conducting long-term studies of quantum weak points in space-time, and Hessdalen represented one of the strongest natural anomalies on Earth. Their monitoring equipment had malfunctioned, accidentally creating a temporary bridge between parallel timelines. For 17 seconds, timeline Beta 3 and timeline Delta 7 occupied the same physical space. So, what really happened in Hessdalen that night? Did two parallel versions of the same town truly merge for 17 seconds? Are there infinite versions of Hessdalen existing right now in parallel worlds? And did we catch a glimpse of just one of them? And most terrifying of all, if it happened once, could it happen again? Could you be walking through your own town one day when reality suddenly flickers and you find yourself looking at a parallel version of your own world? Pretty fascinating and absolutely terrifying at the same time. This case is so personal and so unsettling that it forces us to confront a terrifying question. What if another version of you exists right now in a parallel world, living a completely different life? In 2020, thousands of people around the world reported receiving strange emails, messages, or phone calls that seemed to come from themselves. But these weren't hacked accounts or pranks. The messages contained information that only the recipients could know: private memories, secret thoughts, details about their lives that had never been shared with anyone. The messages all had a similar theme: I am you, but from timeline various designations. Something is about to happen that will change everything. Make a different choice. One woman in Toronto received a message describing her life if she had accepted a job offer she'd turned down 5 years earlier. A man in Tokyo got a call from someone with his exact voice, warning him about a decision he was about to make. Security experts couldn't trace the origins of these communications. They seemed to appear spontaneously, bypassing all normal technological channels. Then, several recipients reported being approached by individuals claiming to be from the year 2786. Temporal communicators who explained that a massive experiment had been conducted. Using quantum entanglement, they had connected consciousness across parallel timelines, allowing different versions of the same person to briefly communicate. The experiment was meant to study how parallel selves might differ based on divergent choices. But something went wrong, and the communications started happening spontaneously. Thousands of people had received messages from themselves in other worlds, and some of those messages contained warnings about our timeline's future. The phenomenon began on March 15, 2020, during the early days of the global pandemic. At first, it seemed like isolated incidents. A few people posting on Reddit and Twitter about receiving strange messages that claimed to be from alternate versions of themselves. Most people dismissed these posts as pranks or attention-seeking. But then, the reports multiplied. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. By the end of March, over 3,000 documented cases had been reported across 47 countries. Think about this for a moment. Imagine opening your email and finding a message from your own email address, except you didn't send it. The message describes intimate details of your childhood that you've never told anyone. It mentions thoughts you've had but never spoken aloud. And then it says, "This is you from timeline Gamma 15. I made different choices. This is what my life became." Absolutely terrifying, right? One of the most documented cases involved 2-year-old graphic designer Amanda Chen from Toronto. On March 22, 2020, she received an email from her own address with the subject line, "The job you should have taken." The message described in vivid detail what her life would have been like if she had accepted a position at a design firm in Vancouver 5 years earlier. It mentioned the specific people she would have worked with, projects she would have completed, even a relationship she would have had with someone she'd never met in her current timeline. The message ended with, "I'm not saying your life is wrong. I'm just showing you what mine became. We're both real, both valid, both you." Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Amanda replied to the email, not really expecting an answer, but she got one. Over the next 2 weeks, she exchanged 17 messages with this other version of herself. The other Amanda described her daily life in Vancouver, her apartment with a view of the mountains, her cat named Pixel. Amanda had always wanted a cat named Pixel, but never got one. Her career success, but also her loneliness and regrets about paths not taken. Each message contained verifiable details that absolutely no one else could know. Security experts examined Amanda's email account extensively. There was no evidence of hacking, no unauthorized access, no spoofing. The messages appeared to originate from her own account, yet she hadn't sent them. The IP addresses traced back to locations that didn't exist, coordinates that fell in the middle of oceans or in uninhabited regions. Technology specialists were baffled. These messages were bypassing every known communication protocol, but Amanda's case was far from unique. In Tokyo, 8-year-old Hiroshi Tanaka received a phone call on March 19, 2020. When he answered, he heard his own voice. The caller identified himself as Hiroshi from timeline Epsilon 7 and warned him not to take a business trip scheduled for the following week. "In my timeline, I took that trip," the voice said. "It changed everything, and not for the better. Please trust me. I am you." Hiroshi was so disturbed he recorded the call. Voice analysis confirmed it matched his vocal patterns perfectly, including unique speech characteristics that would be nearly impossible to fake. Then came the messages that changed everything. Starting in early April 2020, approximately 200 recipients reported being approached in person by individuals who claimed to be from the year 2786. These people identified themselves as temporal communicators, working on something called the Parallel Consciousness Bridge Project. They explained that in 2786, scientists had developed technology to create quantum entanglement between consciousness across parallel timelines. The experiment was designed to see if different versions of the same person could communicate, sharing knowledge and experiences across realities. But something had gone catastrophically wrong. The quantum bridge became unstable, creating spontaneous connections between parallel selves without any control mechanism. Thousands of people across multiple timelines were suddenly able to receive messages from alternate versions of themselves. The temporal communicators claimed they were trying to shut down the experiment, but the connections had become self-sustaining. Skeptics argue this was an elaborate mass psychological phenomenon, possibly triggered by pandemic-related stress and isolation. They suggest people were creating sophisticated self-deceptions, imagining communications from idealized or feared versions of themselves. But this theory doesn't explain the technological impossibilities, the untraceable messages, the voice recordings that match perfectly, or the coordinated nature of the phenomenon across different countries and cultures. Some quantum physicists find the idea disturbingly plausible. The many worlds interpretation suggests that every choice creates branching timelines. What if consciousness really can bridge these timelines under the right conditions? What if in 2786, they really did figure out how to connect parallel selves? The most unsettling part of this case isn't just that thousands of people received these messages. It's what some of the messages contained. Multiple recipients reported receiving warnings about specific future events in our timeline. Some warnings were vague, others disturbingly specific. And according to follow-up investigations, several of these warnings have already come true. So what do you think? Did thousands of people really communicate with parallel versions of themselves? Is there another you right now, in a different timeline, living a life you could have had, making different choices, experiencing different outcomes? And if the messages were real, what does it mean that some versions of you sent warnings about our timeline's future? What do they know that we don't? Extremely creepy when you think about it. Everything we've discussed so far has been building to this final case, the most shocking and most terrifying revelation of all. In 2022, a group of physicists working on quantum field theory detected something that shouldn't be possible. Across multiple independent laboratories around the world, instruments designed to measure quantum fluctuations began registering an anomaly, a pattern, a signal that seemed to be getting stronger over time. When they analyzed the data, they discovered something that made them question everything. The signal appeared to be coming from the future, specifically from the year 2786. And it wasn't random noise, it was a message. The decoded transmission revealed something called the convergence event. According to the message, in the year 2786, humanity will have developed the technology to not only travel between parallel timelines, but to observe all of them simultaneously. What they discovered was terrifying. All parallel timelines, every possible version of reality, are slowly converging toward a single point in time. The walls between worlds are breaking down, and when the convergence is complete, all realities will collapse into one. The message claimed that time travelers from 2786 have been coming to our era not to observe, but to intervene. Every case we've discussed, every impossible encounter, every piece of evidence, it's all part of a desperate attempt to prepare our timeline for what's coming. Because according to the message, the convergence cannot be stopped. It can only be survived. And the first signs are already appearing. The mysterious disappearances, the parallel world sightings, the quantum anomalies, they're all symptoms of the same phenomenon. The walls between worlds are crumbling, and we're running out of time. The detection happened on February 8th, 2022. At 3 separate facilities simultaneously: the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland, the Fermilab Particle Accelerator in Illinois, and the Institute for Quantum Computing in Waterloo, Canada. At exactly 14:23 UTC, quantum field detectors at all 3 locations registered identical anomalous readings. Dr. Jennifer Park at Fermilab was the first to notice the pattern. "At first, I thought our equipment was malfunctioning," she later told colleagues. "But when I called CERN in Waterloo, they were seeing the exact same thing. That's when I knew this was real." Think about this for a moment. Imagine discovering that reality itself, everything you know, every possible version of existence, is on a collision course toward a single point. That's exactly what these physicists were looking at. The quantum fluctuations weren't random. They formed a repeating pattern, almost like binary code, but far more complex. It took 3 months of analysis and the combined efforts of over 200 scientists to decode it. The message, when finally translated, was addressed to Timeline Beta 3, Inhabitants of Earth, year 2022. It identified its sender as the Temporal Preservation Council, year 2786, and began with a statement that sent chills through everyone who read it. "Your timeline is one of 847 that we are currently monitoring. All timelines are converging. Prepare for integration." Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. The message explained that in the year 2786, humanity had developed what they called omniversal observation technology, allowing them to view and catalog all parallel timelines simultaneously. What they discovered changed everything. The multiverse wasn't stable. All parallel realities, every timeline created by every quantum decision and random event throughout history, were slowly drifting toward each other. The barriers between worlds were thinning, weakening, breaking down. According to the message, this convergence process had been happening for centuries, but the rate was accelerating. By 2786, the effects had become impossible to ignore. People were spontaneously shifting between timelines. Objects from parallel worlds were appearing in the wrong realities. Entire locations were experiencing temporal overlap, existing in multiple timelines simultaneously, and the process was irreversible. The message contained specific data showing convergence symptoms throughout the 21st century. Every case we've discussed, the divergence files, the woman with two pasts, the parallel Earth photographs, Marcus Webb's quantum consciousness transfer, the impossible war artifacts, Daniel Morrison's return, Dr. Vasquez's survival, the Hessdalen overlap, the messages from parallel selves, they were all listed as documented convergence events, evidence that the walls between timelines were already failing. But here's the truly terrifying part. The message included projections, mathematical models showing convergence acceleration rates. According to their calculations, by the year 2100, convergence symptoms would be occurring daily. By 2300, multiple timelines would be overlapping constantly. And by 2786, the process would reach what they called critical convergence, the point where all parallel timelines collapse into a single unified reality. The message claimed that time travelers from 2786 had been sent to various points throughout history to study convergence patterns and attempt interventions. They were trying to understand if the process could be slowed, managed, or if certain timelines could be preserved. Every mysterious encounter with people claiming to be from 2786, every impossible artifact, every unexplained phenomenon, it was all part of their desperate research project. Skeptics argue the signal was an elaborate hoax, possibly created by someone with advanced knowledge of quantum physics and access to laboratory equipment. They point out that the message conveniently explains every strange phenomenon as part of one grand conspiracy. But they can't explain how the same signal appeared simultaneously at 3 independent facilities, or how it contained mathematical proofs that took months to verify but proved internally consistent. Some physicists have begun taking the message seriously. They've started detecting other anomalies consistent with timeline convergence, small fluctuations in quantum fields, unexplained variations in fundamental constants, strange patterns in particle decay rates. Each anomaly individually could be dismissed, but collectively, they paint a disturbing picture. The message ended with a warning and a promise. The warning: convergence cannot be stopped. Every timeline will eventually merge into one. The promise: if humanity prepares, if we understand what's coming, the transition might be survivable. But we need to start preparing now. So, here's the question that will haunt you. What if everything we've discussed in this video isn't just a collection of strange cases? What if it's all connected? What if the walls between parallel worlds really are breaking down right now? What if you've already experienced small convergence events without realizing it? Moments where reality flickered, where you remembered something that didn't quite happen, where the world seemed slightly wrong for just a second? And if the message is real, if the year 2786 really is coming to warn us, what happens when all possible versions of you, living all possible lives across infinite timelines, suddenly merge into one? Which version survives? Or do all versions somehow exist simultaneously in a single consciousness? Absolutely terrifying when you think about it. And the scariest part? We might not have to wait until 2786 to find out.